They said I didn't belong here, even though I'm the reason they're still sitting here today. I sat quietly in that gilded room, surrounded by laughter polite enough to hide the contempt. Gowns, champagne, fresh flowers on tables worth millions. But everything felt cold. Isabel stood up. Her voice rang out like metal. It's unfortunate. Not everyone appreciates our family's traditions. Once again, it was about me. Once again, that look. I stood. The chair scraped against the marble floor, and a few heads turned. I didn't ask for permission. I asked for the mic, and they gave it to me. I've been silent for 3 years. But today, I'm telling a story you'd rather not hear, but won't be able to forget. I looked straight at Margaret, then Isabel. And in just 3 minutes, you'll understand who really doesn't belong here. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, where the streetlights flicker and sirens are more familiar than alarm clocks. My mother worked 3 jobs. She mopped floors at a nail salon by day, cleared tables at a Mexican restaurant by night, and on weekends, washed clothes by the hour. I studied by candlelight, not for the romance, but because our power was cut. On freezing nights, we boiled water on the gas stove just to stay warm. I did my homework at a plastic table beside a fogged-up window. One day, I asked, "Why don't we move?" My mother didn't even look up. "You don't need to move somewhere else. You need to become someone the world makes room for." Then she added, "And never ask for permission to exist. If you can stand, you belong." I was a top student, always among the highest in the class. But in 8th grade, when I applied to the advanced program, my name didn't make the list. I asked the teacher. She glanced at my grades, then at me. Sometimes, it's not just about scores. There are other factors to consider. I didn't press further. I understood. When I won a full scholarship to an elite private school, I thought things had changed. But during orientation, a professor pulled me aside after the session. "You have real potential, but this environment is very particular. You may want to consider somewhere that fits your background better." Fits better meant somewhere they weren't. They were afraid I'd shatter the image they were used to, a black girl, from a place they'd rather forget, walking into their world on merit, what they didn't know. That was the real mismatch. I met Marcus on a rainy afternoon. I had just left a downtown meeting, arms full of thick documents, when an SUV swerved to the curb, its back wheel landing square in a puddle. I was soaked. The dress I'd picked for my pitch was ruined. My papers torn at the edges. A tall man stepped out. Perfect suit, calm demeanor, no rush. But the moment he saw me, he stopped. No shallow apology. No walk-off like so many men with money. He took off his coat and placed it over my shoulders. "I made a mess, but I'll make it right." 2 hours later, we were sitting in a quiet cafe. He asked what I did for work. I said simply, "I consult for a few companies." I didn't tell him I was the founder. I wanted to see how he treated a drenched girl, before he knew who I was. 2 months into dating, Marcus told me. Not during a romantic evening, but in the quiet lull of my favorite Italian restaurant. "Serena, there's something you should know. My family, they're not easy. They have their standards. They're used to a certain kind of person." I looked him straight in the eyes. No denial, no pretending I didn't get it. I've lived with that look my entire life, the one that scans from skin color to zip code. I didn't need a warning. I needed just one thing. I don't need their approval. I just need you not to become them. Marcus held my hand, said nothing more, but in his eyes, I could see it. He was trying to believe love could break the walls built by generations of bias, and so was I. At the time. The house was so big, the sound of my heels echoed like someone else's footsteps. Marcus held my hand as we entered, but his hand was cold. I noticed right away. Margaret stood in the foyer. Ivory silk gown, understated jewelry, but expensive. She looked me up and down, like she was assessing the material of a package just delivered. "Oh, Marcus's girlfriend?" Her voice was soft, but cold, like winter on expensive glass. I smiled and extended my hand. She didn't take it right away. Then Isabel stepped down from the staircase, younger than me, but with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to ask for anything. "Serena?" She pronounced each syllable. "Is that your real name?" I kept smiling. "Yes, my mother gave it to me because she believed I'd grow into it." Isabel let out a faint laugh, then turned away, and I stood there, fully aware. This wasn't a welcome, it was an inspection. Dinner was served with Italian wine, French porcelain, and silver knives engraved with their family crest. Margaret asked if I'd ever been to Aspen. I shook my head. Oh, that's unfortunate. Winter there isn't for everyone. Isabel mentioned Florence, then Monaco, then a golf club for original members only, all while glancing at me. I kept my smile, sat tall, polite, not because I didn't understand, but because I understood all too well. When they asked about my work, I shared about the consulting firm. Fortune 500 clients, a 15-person team, million-dollar contracts. Margaret set her wine down. How lovely. Small businesses really are the backbone of the economy. My smile didn't waver. But under the table, my hands clenched tight. I wasn't having dinner. I was attending a performance on Class, and I was the uninvited audience. A week before the wedding, Margaret invited me for tea. She handed me a thick envelope. Inside, a prenuptial agreement. Don't take this the wrong way. It's not about you. It's just, our family has a lot to protect. I stared at the printed words, the clauses, the legal signatures, all ready, just waiting for my name. Marcus sat beside me, tea in hand, eyes on the window, silent. I asked, "You knew about this?" He nodded, slightly, like a machine. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I placed the pen down, didn't sign. I don't want your family's money, but I need to know. Do they see me as a threat, or as the woman you choose to walk beside? Marcus said nothing, and, for the first time, I felt like I was marrying into a legacy, not a man. The wedding was held at a private lakeside estate. White drapes, violins, wine without price tags. I walked the flower-lined aisle, unsure who was there for me. Everything was perfect, except for the feeling that I was playing the bride in someone else's wedding. The next day, the society column read, "Million-dollar wedding of the Beaumont family." Photo of me and Marcus. Caption said, "Marcus Beaumont and bride." My name wasn't there. I opened Instagram. Isabel had just posted a photo, a family picture from the wedding. Marcus, Margaret, Isabel, and an empty space where I had stood. I looked closer. The photo had been cropped. I remembered that moment clearly. I was in the middle, smiling, genuinely. But that day, I learned, some families will invite you to the wedding, but never include you in the picture. At a fundraising gala months after the wedding, I stood near the bar holding a champagne glass. A woman approached. Red dress, wavy blonde hair. That smile, like she knew exactly who she was. She held out her glass without looking at me. "Champagne, please." I didn't respond right away. I looked at the glass in my hand, then back at her. I tightened my grip on the stem. Cold. Very cold. Then said, calm and clear, "I'm Marcus's wife. But thank you for the honest mistake." She stiffened. Eyes flicked away. No apology, just a polite smile, and she walked off. But the eyes around us, they said everything. The issue wasn't the glass. It was that they assumed I was holding it to serve. Has anyone ever looked at you like you didn't belong where you stood? Tell me, because maybe we're more alike than we think. Marcus started coming home late, almost every night. No texts, no real explanations. I didn't ask, but I remembered. A week later, I saw Isabel moving into Margaret's estate. She claimed it was to be closer to family, but I knew she'd never leave her Riverview apartment without a real reason. Then I noticed the small things. The antique painting in the living room, gone. Margaret stopped wearing her favorite diamond set. One of the luxury cars in the garage was replaced by an older model. I opened a file Marcus had left on his desk. Internal financial statements. The numbers were a mess. Negative returns. Interrupted funding rounds. The short-term liabilities section was marked in red. I closed the file, my hands slightly trembling. I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I knew. They would never tell me. I spent 3 nights poring over every line in that financial report. No one knew. Not a single person in that 3-story mansion realized the one they said didn't belong was the only one who understood the numbers. I found the flaw in their investment model. Leverage was too high. The Texas branch had quietly shut down. Without emergency funding, their company would collapse in less than 3 months. 3 months. I sat in my small office, desk lamp casting light on the grain of the wood. I picked up my phone and dialed. "Hi, Andrew. I need you to set up a new holding company. Name it, Phoenix Holdings. I'm buying out the debt of a certain company, but the owner must remain completely anonymous. While they saw me as the problem, I quietly became the solution. I sold part of my company shares, liquidated 3 long-term investments, transferred $50 million into an anonymous account. Phoenix Holdings, a name that sounded like prophecy, acquired the entire outstanding debt of the Beaumont family company. The debt forgiveness contract was signed in a private room. No press, no photos, just one sentence in the minutes. The debt is permanently forgiven, with no repayment required. Weeks later, I overheard Marcus on the phone. His voice sounded lighter. I don't know who saved us, but if that deal hadn't come through, hundreds of employees would have lost their jobs. I stood behind a half-closed door, hand resting lightly on the wall. I didn't need them to know. I just needed the people they hired, people like me, to keep their jobs. In the shadows, I did what their bright chandeliers never dared to, save the very thing they called a legacy. Marcus stood at the doorway of the dressing room. His suit was pressed, hair combed, but his eyes hesitant. If you don't want to go to the gala tonight, I understand. I was putting on earrings, small diamond studs my mother left me, not as brilliant as Margaret's, but heavy with a lifetime of labor. I looked at him through the mirror, not angry, not sarcastic, just calm, after a decision fully formed. No, I'm going. I adjusted the strap on my dress. The heels sat ready beside the bed. I'm not going to be seen. I'm going to be heard. Marcus nodded, slowly, not sure if it was agreement or surrender. I spritzed a touch of perfume. Wood, leather. Tonight wasn't just another event. Tonight was the first time I entered their room, without asking for permission. Crystal chandeliers poured golden light across the gala floor. Margaret opened the evening with her signature "everything's under control" smile. Isabel turned in a deep red couture dress, walking like the room belonged to her. They greeted guests, shook hands, laughed on cue, looked past me like I was a misplaced server. I didn't force my way in, didn't smile. I stood at the edge of the room, champagne glass in hand, eyes quietly scanning. I watched. I remembered. No one knew this night would be different. I counted their steps, their scripted words echoing through microphones. I wasn't waiting to be introduced. I was waiting because I had chosen the exact moment. Tonight wasn't about them. Tonight was the moment. A woman cropped out of the photo would step into the center of the stage. The clinking of glasses softened as lights dimmed toward the stage. Isabel stepped up, heels clicking on the marble floor. She smiled like she was about to give a warm toast, but I knew that tone. I just want to share a few words on behalf of the family. Conversation stopped. She continued, tone rehearsed. Not everyone understands the value of tradition. Not everyone grew up with 8-course dinners and classical music. Her eyes drifted toward me, a slight smirk, like she was telling an inside joke only the right kind could get. Family isn't something you can buy. It's blood. It's history. It's alignment. My hand tightened around my glass. My heartbeat wasn't faster, just deeper. I wasn't surprised. Only this time I wasn't going to stay silent. I set my glass on the nearest table. My hand didn't shake. One step, then another. I walked out from the rows and toward the stage. I'd like the mic. Isabel turned, eyes flicking between me and the crowd. Margaret's voice rose from the table, still soft but stone cold. There's no need for that, Serena. I paused, looked at her, at the eyes that once measured me like unwanted staff. I spoke, slowly, clearly. I think there is. No laughter, no clinking, no music, just a thick, breathless silence. I climbed the steps. Isabel hesitated, still clutching the mic. I extended my hand. She let go, and for the first time in 3 years I stood exactly where they thought I never belonged, with a voice that was finally mine. My name is Serena. My mother chose that name because she believed I deserved a peaceful life, even if we never had a single peaceful day. The spotlight hit me directly, but I didn't lower my head. I grew up in Southside Chicago, third-floor walk-up, cracked windows. My mom worked her third night shift as I studied by candlelight because we couldn't afford the electric bill. A few murmurs rippled from the corner of the room. I kept going. On weekends, we split a single pack of ramen, not because it was fun, but because it was all we had. I scanned the room. Some averted their eyes. And of all the things I learned there, one line from my mother stuck with me. Never ask permission to exist. I paused, then looked straight at Isabel. I didn't come here to be accepted. I came to leave a mark. I'm used to being underestimated. I rolled the mic gently in my hand, not looking at anyone in particular, yet everyone felt seen. I'm used to being judged by glances, to polite, empty smiles. When I say I'm an entrepreneur, a breath, not weak, just focused, to anchor the rage, calm, intentional. I remember someone saying, small businesses are vital to the economy, yet never asked what mine actually did. I looked toward Margaret. No need to name her. My words did enough. I was once advised to choose a place that fit my background, as if my worth was tied to a zip code. I paused. Eyes swept the gilded room. But let me remind you, when a woman of color walks through all those barriers and still stands here, maybe it's you who doesn't belong. I've heard the whispers these past 3 years, that I was the problem, the blemish on the family portrait. I paused. Some looked down. Others stiffened their spines. But let me share a little truth. My voice lowered, each word dropping like a stone in the still air. 3 months ago, the company you're all here to represent was on the verge of collapse. And the woman you thought was a stain is the one who saved it. Margaret froze. Isabel looked up, confused. I wired $50 million from my personal account, bought the debt, saved hundreds of jobs. No name, no credit, no thank you expected. I turned to Isabel, and I did it, in silence, while you were still busy deciding if I fit in. If you were Serena, would you reveal the truth in front of everyone, or would you stay silent? Leave a comment. I want to hear your honest thoughts. Why didn't I reveal this earlier? I looked around the room, my voice low but steady. Not because I was afraid, not because I wanted gratitude. My eyes found Marcus. In that heavy silence, my gaze softened. I just didn't want him to lose the one thing he was still trying to hold on to. Family. A pause. Then I continued. I spent my childhood holding tightly to my mother's hand, a woman who gave everything for those she loved. I know what it means to sacrifice quietly, and I chose that path not because I'm small, but because I'm strong enough to put others before myself. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because I loved the man who once chose me when every gaze around him told him not to. Some emotions don't need to shout. One sentence can bring an entire room to silence. Marcus stood. His voice wavered, but it was clear. There's something you need to know. Before the wedding, my mother threatened me. I stared at him, unblinking. She said if I married you, she'd pull all her funding from the company, cut everything off. The air froze. No one breathed. My fists clenched, eyes stinging, my chest tightened. And you still chose me? He nodded, painful, certain, without hesitation. I didn't know how it would end, but I knew one thing. Losing you meant losing everything. I didn't respond. I just looked at him. For a long time, in that moment, with 100 eyes watching, there was no gala, no wealth, no status, just 2 people, and the truth. I looked at each face in that family, the ones who once smirked behind my back, who belittled every step I took. My voice didn't shake. It wasn't angry. It was sharp as a blade slicing through silence. I forgive you. No one dared to exhale. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to let hatred define me. Margaret bowed her head. Isabel looked lost, and I stood firm. Not because I was above them, but because I was no longer beneath their shadow. Real strength isn't found in fighting back. It's in knowing you don't need to. I set the mic down, but my words still echoed. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the choice not to be dragged down by someone else's smallness. As I stepped off the stage, no applause followed, only silence. But it wasn't the silence of dismissal anymore. It was the silence of people who had just seen something they couldn't unsee. Their eyes shifted, the same ones who once walked past me like I was invisible. Now followed my every step back to my seat. No one spoke, but they couldn't look away. Margaret sat still, her hands clenched on the table. She couldn't meet my gaze. Isabel, the girl who always held her chin high as if everyone else was beneath her, now looked down. I didn't need them to say sorry. because from that moment on, I knew my presence had become undeniable, and respect sometimes begins with the helplessness of having no other choice. The next morning, a small envelope lay at the door of my office. No return address, no signature. Inside was a thin sheet of paper, typed clearly. No handwriting. I don't know who you are in this family, but I know if it weren't for you, they would have collapsed. I work in accounting. I saw the numbers, and I saw that debt disappear like magic. Thank you for staying silent, even when they didn't deserve it. I read it 3 times. I didn't cry. I just sighed. Not because of the letter, but because finally someone saw me. Not through my skin, not through my name, but through my actions. That quiet acknowledgement was small, but enough to remind me my silence had never been invisible. The reading room was still, curtains drawn, soft light falling on worn leather chairs. Margaret sat upright, fingers laced. In front of her, Serena and Isabel. For the first time, the 3 of them sat together, without politeness as a mask. Margaret spoke first, slowly, like walking across unfamiliar ground. I was wrong. Not because I hated you, but because I stayed silent when others did. No immediate reaction. Isabel leaned back, then spoke, her voice lower, more real than ever. You had everything. That I was just handed, and you had to earn it. I know that. You scared me. Margaret turned to her daughter. For the first time, she didn't see a perfect replica, but a woman missing something essential. Growth. The room remained quiet, but this time, it wasn't fear holding their tongues, it was because they were finally listening. Serena sat tall, her gaze steady. No bowed head, no avoidance. Her voice was calm, even. No bitterness, just truth. I never demanded to be loved. Love is something people give freely. I wouldn't force it. She paused. Hands on the table, fingers intertwined, grounded. But I do have the right to be respected. Not because of who I married. Not because I saved this company. But because I exist. With value that is mine alone. Margaret was silent. Isabel turned away, lips pressed together like holding back something unspoken. Serena stood, no tears. Because the greatest validation doesn't come from someone else changing, but from no longer needing their permission to be yourself. Marcus entered the room. No one called him, no one signaled. He walked straight to Serena, faced her, eyes locked. No long speech, just enough. I've always chosen you. Then he hugged her, in front of the entire room. No walls, no apology. The embrace wasn't tight, but it was enough to keep her from stepping back. Marcus looked up, at every face that once doubted. From this day forward, Serena walks behind no one. She walks beside me, or ahead. His voice didn't rise, but it rang out like a bell. No applause followed, but no one ever looked at her the same way again, because not everyone gets someone willing to stand up for them, and not everyone is brave enough to be worth standing for. Serena stepped down from the stage, but each step felt like a permanent imprint on the room. No more mocking whispers, no more judgmental stares, only silence. This time, the kind that listens. She paused, turned back to face the crowd. No mic, no raised voice. I'm not special. I'm just a woman who once got asked, "Who do you think you are to belong here?" And it took me years to answer. She scanned the room. No anger, no pride, just a deep knowing. You don't need permission to exist. You just need to know who you are. One sentence. But a compass for everyone who's ever been told. You're too different to belong. Sometimes the world makes you feel like you need permission to exist. Like you have to shrink, change, or fit in, just to be accepted. But no one was born to beg for space in their own life. You don't need to be chosen. You just need to choose to rise, because you are worthy. Even if others aren't ready to admit it. If you've ever been dismissed for your background, your skin, or where you come from, type, I belong. Not for pity, but to remind yourself, you belong anywhere you walk into with pride. If this story made you silent in recognition, share it, subscribe, and if you want to hear more stories like this, we're here, with you.